If you're hearing this episode around the time it comes out, it means I'm taking some time off after the birth of my son. I've recorded these ahead of time and will most likely not be available on social media for the next few weeks. But you can still get the story behind twice a week if you're subscribed to the podcast. Consider this series to be like a substitute teacher. We won't go as in-depth as in previous episodes, but we'll briefly touch on a number of different topics in each show. The series focuses on Billy Joel's song, "We Didn't Start the Fire," and the headline-making events and people he mentions. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. The next two episodes focus on the years 1964 through 1989, since Billy Joel didn't really keep to a specific order for this last verse. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind We Didn't Start the Fire, 1964 to 1989, Part 1. While birth control was approved by the FDA for contraceptive use in 1960, by 1964, when these verses take place, birth control remained controversial, illegal in 8 states. And in 1965, in the court case of Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court struck down the state's ban on birth control, stating it violated the right to marital privacy. By that year, 6.5 million American women were on the pill, making it the most popular form of birth control in the United States. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of Communist North Vietnam during the Vietnam War. During this war, North Vietnam fought against South Vietnam, known as the Viet Cong, which was allied with the United States. Ho Chi Minh died in 1969, and in 1975, when Saigon fell, the city was renamed Ho Chi Minh City in his honor. We talked about Richard Nixon winning the Senate race in California back in the first episode of this series. Well, he's back again in this episode, as he was elected president in 1968 after beating Vice President Hubert Humphrey in a close race. In fact, because of a third-party candidate, George Wallace, Nixon won by fewer than 500,000 votes. He ran with promises to bring America together again following the years of anti-war protests and fights for civil rights. The term moonshot is now used to describe a lofty project with countless rewards, but also plenty of risks. But it comes from the July 1969 Apollo 11 spaceflight. Early in his presidency, John F. Kennedy put out a challenge to put man on the moon before the 1960s ended. And Apollo 11, carrying astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, became the first to land on the moon, with Armstrong becoming the first person to walk on the moon. Woodstock is now known as the be-all, end-all of music festivals. The 3-day celebration, known as 3 Days of Peace and Music, was originally an idea to raise money to build a recording studio in the Woodstock, New York area. When a farmer donated his 600-acre dairy farm for the event, no one anticipated the festival, which sold 186,000 tickets, would host more than 400,000 people. The 32 acts included Grateful Dead, The Who, Jefferson Airplane, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Joan Baez, and Jimi Hendrix, whose version of the Star-Spangled Banner still stands out to many as one of the most uplifting moments of the weekend. In 1972, members of President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign were arrested inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate building. They were attempting to wiretap the phones and steal secret documents. It remains unclear whether Nixon knew this was happening, but he did try to cover it up afterward, and in 1974, he resigned. Although many will argue the story behind true punk rock was an underground movement of the working-class youth rebelling against the stadium rock style of the middle class, many associate the popularity of punk rock with the Sex Pistols arriving in Britain in 1976, and the movement quickly spread to the United States. Menachem Begin was the Prime Minister of Israel from 1977 through 1983. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1978 and resigned in 1983, but we'll get back to him in a minute. Former actor Ronald Reagan began his foray into politics when he made a speech for presidential candidate Barry Goldwater in 1964. He went on to secure 2 terms as governor of California, and after 2 unsuccessful bids for the Republican presidential nominations in 1968 and 1976, he finally ran and won in 1980 against incumbent Jimmy Carter and served 2 terms. Credited with cutting taxes and bringing an end to the Cold War, he is known to have redefined the Republican Party during his presidency. When the Israeli-Palestinian conflict escalated, Israel's Prime Minister Begin was responsible for mounting an invasion of Lebanon against the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1982. The treatment of Palestinians under Israeli rule was considered unfair and protested against. When Billy Joel sang Terror on the Airline, one such airline hijack being referred to was the Palestinian hijack of Air France Flight 139, in which 2 Palestinians and 2 Germans hijacked a plane of mainly Jewish and Israeli passengers and diverted it to Benghazi, Libya, and then to Uganda, with the hijackers' intention of exchanging the hostages for the release of more than 50 Palestinians and affiliated militants imprisoned. During the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah of Iran, who was supported by the United States, and he created an Islamic State, taking hostages at the U.S. Embassy, who were finally released after 444 days. When the Soviet Union entered Afghanistan in 1979 to protect communist interests, the United States provided support and supplied arms to Afghanistan, and the Soviets withdrew after 10 years. Thanks for listening to The Story Behind. In the next episode, we'll explore the rest of the years from 1964 through 1989, as referenced in Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire. For more information, visit thestorybehindpodcast.com, and you can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @StoryBehindPod. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.